The evening was alive with lights and laughter. The grand hall shimmered under the golden chandeliers, reflecting off the polished marble floors. The air smelled of rich perfumes and the delicate scent of flowers arranged in tall vases. Guests dressed in sparkling gowns and sharp suits moved about, holding glasses of champagne and exchanging polite conversation. Lively music played from a string quartet in the corner, giving the room a soft, elegant rhythm that matched the atmosphere. Among the crowd moved a young waitress, quietly carrying trays of drinks. She was dressed in the simple black uniform of the staff, her hair tied back neatly. Her eyes observed the party with careful attention. She had worked in many events like this before, always unnoticed, always blending into the background. But there was something about this night that made her feel a mixture of nerves and anticipation. The host of the party was known for his wealth and his sharp tongue. He had a reputation for showing off his power, for testing the boundaries of his guests and even his staff. Some admired him for his success, while others feared the possibility of being humiliated in his presence. He moved through the crowd with a confident stride, a glass of wine in one hand, occasionally smirking at the reactions of people around him. As the waitress served drinks, her steps careful not to spill anything, the host's eyes landed on her. He noticed her calm demeanor, the subtle grace in the way she moved. A mischievous smile crossed his face, and he began to whisper to a few of the other guests nearby, pointing discreetly in her direction. They all turned to look, some raising their eyebrows, curious about what he was planning. The waitress, unaware of the whispers, continued with her work, moving steadily from table to table, trying not to attract attention. The atmosphere in the hall was buzzing with anticipation. Guests laughed at jokes, some danced lightly near the edges of the room, and waiters weaved through the crowd, balancing trays of sparkling wine, desserts, and appetizers. The young waitress felt the pressure of the environment, the eyes of so many people on her, but she remained focused. She had learned long ago how to keep calm under observation. Suddenly, the host stopped near the center of the hall, his gaze fixed on the grand piano standing elegantly near the back of the room. The piano's black surface shone under the lights, its strings hidden beneath the polished lid, waiting to be played. He chuckled softly to himself, as though he had just thought of a clever idea. The guests near him leaned slightly forward, curious about the reason for his attention. The host then looked back at the young waitress. His smirk widened, and a sense of challenge appeared in his eyes. He called out, his voice clear enough to carry to those nearby, though the rest of the room barely heard. He asked if she could play the piano. The question seemed innocent at first, but there was a hint of mockery in his tone, a subtle implication that he did not expect her to do it well. The guests nearest to the scene turned their heads, some intrigued, some ready to laugh at what they assumed would be an awkward performance. The young waitress paused. Her heart beat a little faster, and for a moment she considered refusing. But something inside her made her hesitate. She had played piano for years, in quiet moments when no one was watching. Music was her escape, her secret talent, her pride. The thought of showing it in front of a crowd that expected her to fail stirred a mix of fear and determination. She swallowed her nervousness and nodded slightly, agreeing to approach the piano. The host's smile broadened, as if he had already won. As she moved toward the piano, her steps were careful and measured. The guests nearby watched with growing curiosity, some leaning slightly closer to see how she would perform. The string quartet paused briefly, sensing a shift in the room's energy. The soft hum of conversation quieted as people turned to focus on the unfolding scene. The young waitress reached the piano and paused for a moment, her fingers hovering just above the keys. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, feeling the polished wood beneath her hands. She remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing in her room, her fingers dancing across the keys, creating melodies that made her heart soar. Those memories gave her strength. She could do this, she told herself. She would not let anyone's expectations or ridicule define her. The host leaned slightly closer, his eyes filled with a mix of anticipation and amusement. He expected a shaky performance, maybe a few wrong notes that would draw laughter from the crowd. But the young waitress ignored the host and focused on the piano, letting her fingers find the keys naturally. She began to play softly, almost tentatively at first, a gentle melody that flowed through the room. The sound of the piano caught everyone's attention. Guests stopped their conversations, turning their eyes toward the music. The melody was simple but beautiful, and it filled the grand hall with a warmth that seemed to touch everyone present. The young waitress's fingers moved with confidence now, each note clear and precise, each chord resonating with emotion. The host's smirk faded slightly as he realized that the performance was not what he expected. As the music continued, the room grew quieter. Even the background chatter and laughter disappeared, replaced by the sound of the piano and the emotions it carried. The young waitress closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her, and felt a sense of liberation. She was no longer the shy, unnoticed waitress. She was the creator of something beautiful, commanding the attention of everyone in the room without words. The host watched, astonished. The confidence he had assumed she lacked was now evident in every note she played. Guests whispered to each other, expressing surprise and admiration. Some smiled broadly, impressed by the unexpected talent, while others leaned forward, eager to hear more. The energy in the room had shifted from anticipation of humiliation to awe and appreciation. The young waitress continued to play, the melody growing richer and more expressive. She added delicate flourishes and subtle variations, showcasing her skill without arrogance. The music flowed naturally, as if telling a story, each note reflecting her emotions and inner strength. The host's earlier amusement had disappeared completely, replaced by a stunned silence. For the first time that evening, he seemed unsure of how to react. When she finally finished, the last note lingered in the air like a soft echo. There was a moment of complete stillness, as if the room collectively held its breath, absorbing the beauty of what had just been played. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, starting from one table and spreading throughout the hall. Guests clapped enthusiastically, some cheering, some calling out praise. The young waitress smiled modestly, acknowledging the applause with a slight bow. The host, for all his wealth and confidence, stood frozen, realizing that he had underestimated her. The young waitress had turned a moment meant for humiliation into a display of talent and grace. She had captivated the room, not through bravado, but through skill, poise, and authenticity. It was clear to everyone that she had a gift that could not be ignored or mocked. As the applause continued, the young waitress returned to her duties, carrying herself with a newfound confidence. The party resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. Guests now looked at her with respect and admiration, and even the host seemed humbled, though he tried to hide it. The music had spoken louder than any words could, and the young waitress had made her mark in a way that no one would forget. The applause had barely faded when the host, still watching from the center of the hall, decided to push the situation further. He wanted to test her more, to see if her confidence would falter under even greater pressure. His voice carried across the room as he spoke, playful but with a hint of challenge. He asked if she could play something more complicated, something that would truly show whether she was skilled or just lucky with a simple melody. The guests around him perked up, intrigued. Some whispered among themselves, eager to see the outcome, expecting perhaps a moment of embarrassment for the young waitress. The young waitress paused at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. She could feel the intensity of every gaze in the room. Every eye seemed fixed on her, some curious, some skeptical. Her heart beat faster, but she reminded herself that she had practiced many times in solitude, perfecting her skills for moments like this, even if she had never imagined anyone would demand her talent under such scrutiny. She took a deep breath and nodded, signaling that she would accept the challenge. As she began, her movements were deliberate and careful. The first few notes were soft, almost a gentle introduction, easing herself into the complex piece she had chosen. The melody quickly grew in depth and complexity, with chords that echoed through the grand hall. Her fingers danced across the keys with a fluidity that made the music feel alive. Each note carried emotion, telling a story that went beyond the surface of the composition. The guests listened intently, caught between fascination and disbelief. Some leaned forward, unable to look away, as if the music had a gravitational pull on their attention. The host's initial amusement began to waver. He had expected a stumble, a few wrong notes, a moment that would make her blush and the guests laugh quietly at the situation. But instead, the young waitress played with skill and emotion that surprised everyone. He watched the way her fingers moved with confidence, the precision with which she struck each note, and the expressive dynamics that made the music breathe. It was clear she had years of training and natural talent, far beyond what he had assumed. Guests began to murmur softly among themselves, exchanging looks of surprise. A few whispered words like incredible and amazing, while others simply shook their heads, trying to process what they were hearing. The music filled the hall, reaching every corner, and even the string quartet had paused, allowing her performance to take center stage. The young waitress's focus was complete. She was no longer aware of the host's challenge, the audience's expectations, or the weight of the moment. All that mattered was the music and the expression of her feelings through it. Her piece grew more intricate, incorporating subtle rhythms and unexpected harmonies that captured the room's attention. The once confident guests, who had expected to see a humiliating display, now watched in awe. Their eyes reflected genuine admiration, and some were moved almost to tears by the depth of emotion conveyed through her playing. Even the host, who had attempted to assert his control, found himself caught off guard. He could not hide the astonishment that flickered across his face. The smug expression he wore earlier was replaced by a mixture of disbelief and respect. As the young waitress continued, she noticed a few guests shifting uncomfortably. They had intended to see her fail, to enjoy the satisfaction of witnessing her embarrassment, but instead they were confronted with undeniable talent. The hall was no longer filled with whispers of judgment, but with quiet awe and respect. People leaned slightly closer to the piano, some even holding their breath as they absorbed the beauty of the performance. Every note she played seemed to command attention without demanding it, a natural authority that came from skill and confidence. Time seemed to slow as she reached the climax of her piece. The music swelled, rising and falling with intensity, capturing a range of emotions from gentle sorrow to triumphant joy. Her fingers moved swiftly and gracefully, executing complex passages with apparent ease. The hall was silent except for the music, the audience captivated, unable to tear their eyes away from her performance. The host's challenge had turned into a moment of revelation. He realized that he had underestimated her, assuming that a young waitress could not possibly possess such talent. Now it was clear that he had misjudged her entirely. With the final notes, she allowed the music to slow, the last chord lingering in the air like a soft sigh. There was a brief pause, a stillness that seemed to hold the entire room captive, as if everyone was collectively taking a moment to process the brilliance they had just witnessed. Then, as if a wave had broken, the room erupted in applause. The sound was genuine, filled with admiration and amazement. Guests clapped loudly, some cheering, some standing to show their respect. The young waitress took a modest bow, acknowledging the praise without arrogance, her face showing a quiet satisfaction. The host, meanwhile, remained silent for a moment, absorbing what had happened. The power he had assumed was his had been neutralized by the young waitress's talent and poise. He had intended to create a moment of ridicule, but instead, he had witnessed a display of artistry that humbled him. The shift in energy was unmistakable. The room had changed from a scene of potential embarrassment to a celebration of unexpected skill and courage. As she returned to her duties, carrying trays and moving gracefully among the guests, the young waitress felt a surge of confidence. She had faced a challenge designed to shame her and transformed it into a moment of triumph. People now looked at her with genuine respect, some even offering compliments as they accepted drinks or appetizers. The string quartet resumed their music, but it felt different now, as if inspired by her performance. The atmosphere in the hall was lighter, filled with excitement and admiration rather than judgment and expectation. The host, though still in the center of the room, now observed with a new understanding. The young waitress had demonstrated that talent and composure could shift power and perception in an instant. He could no longer control the narrative of the evening in the way he had intended. She had taken an opportunity meant for humiliation and turned it into a testament to her abilities and inner strength. Throughout the rest of the evening, whispers about her performance continued. Guests discussed the unexpected display of talent, comparing notes on the skill and emotion she had conveyed. Some speculated about her background, wondering if she had formal training, while others simply marveled at the way she had held her composure under pressure. The young waitress moved through it all with quiet grace, aware of the impression she had left but not letting it affect her humility. The night wore on, filled with laughter, music, and conversation, but the memory of her performance lingered in the minds of everyone present. She had turned a moment of potential embarrassment into one of triumph, proving that skill, confidence, and authenticity could overcome even the most challenging circumstances. By the end of the party, it was clear to all that she was no longer just a waitress in the background. She was the star of the evening, someone whose talent could not be ignored or underestimated. The young waitress returned to her duties, carrying trays with a steady hand, but her mind was still alive with the memory of the applause. She felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. The performance had gone better than she had expected, yet she knew that the host's amusement might not be finished. He was not someone easily satisfied, and she could sense that he might try to challenge her again, perhaps in a way that would be even more intimidating. The thought made her heart race, but it also ignited a quiet determination within her. As she moved between the tables, she caught glimpses of the guests' faces. Some were still staring at her in admiration, others were quietly discussing her skill, and a few seemed unsure of how to react. The hall had changed. Where laughter and casual conversation had once dominated, now there was a sense of respect in the air. People were watching her, not as a mere servant of the evening, but as someone with talent and poise. That realization made her shoulders straighten and her steps more confident. The host, meanwhile, observed from a distance. His eyes followed her movements, trying to gauge whether her earlier performance had shaken her or revealed a weakness he could exploit. He was known for his sharp mind and calculating nature, and he took pleasure in controlling situations. Yet, in this moment he found himself both surprised and unsettled. The waitress had turned his planned humiliation into a display of beauty and confidence, and he was unsure how to regain the upper hand. The young waitress approached the piano again, not because she was commanded to, but because something in her urged her forward. The music still called to her, a quiet voice reminding her of the joy it brought, the freedom it gave her soul. She paused for a moment, placing her fingers above the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath them. This time, she allowed herself a few moments of reflection. She thought about the countless hours she had spent practicing in solitude, the dedication it had taken to master even the simplest pieces, and the sacrifices she had made to nurture her talent. Those memories gave her strength. Her thoughts briefly wandered to the host and the intentions behind his challenge. He had sought to embarrass her, to highlight her status as a servant, to make her feel small in front of a room full of influential people. For a moment, she felt the weight of that expectation pressing down on her, the potential for humiliation lingering like a shadow. Yet, she also felt a growing fire within herself. She would not allow anyone's judgment or power to diminish her gift. Music was her voice, and she would let it speak without fear. The audience, sensing another moment of anticipation, shifted their attention toward the piano. Whispers spread through the room. Some guests speculated whether she would attempt something more complex or falter under pressure. Others exchanged looks of curiosity and admiration, eager to witness the next chapter of this unfolding story. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but also with expectation. Every eye in the hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her next move. The young waitress took a deep breath and began to play again, softly at first. This time, her performance was more intricate, weaving subtle patterns and delicate harmonies that drew the listeners in. Each note carried emotion, reflecting her inner resolve, her determination to rise above the challenge. The music was not just about skill. It was about expressing her feelings, about telling a story that transcended words. The guests were mesmerized, caught in the spell of her playing, their previous judgments dissolving into awe and admiration. As she played, she became acutely aware of her surroundings. She noticed the subtle expressions of the guests, the wide eyes of surprise, the nods of approval, the whispered compliments. She saw the host's expression shift, from amusement to a mix of disbelief and respect. It was clear that her music had captured the room, that she had turned the tables on the challenge and claimed her own space within the grand hall. The young waitress felt a sense of empowerment, realizing that she could command attention through her talent and composure alone. Her mind drifted to the past, recalling moments when she had played piano in quiet rooms, practicing for herself, without anyone watching. Those private sessions had shaped her skill, nurtured her confidence, and allowed her to explore her creativity. Now, in the midst of an audience that had once expected to see her falter, she felt that all those hours of dedication were finally paying off. She allowed herself to be fully present, her fingers moving naturally over the keys, creating a melody that resonated with emotion and authenticity. The complexity of her performance grew, yet she felt no panic. The challenge that might have intimidated someone else only fueled her determination. Each note, each chord, was an assertion of her identity, a quiet statement that she would not be defined by the expectations or prejudices of others. The music became a bridge between her inner world and the audience, a way to communicate her strength and resilience without saying a word. The young waitress was fully in command of the piano and the moment. The host, still watching, realized that he could no longer predict her actions. His attempts to control the situation had been rendered ineffective by her talent and composure. The audience, sensing this shift, responded with subtle expressions of encouragement. Some guests leaned closer to hear the nuances of the melody, others exchanged quiet words of admiration, and a few were visibly moved, their eyes reflecting the depth of emotion conveyed through the music. The young waitress's performance had transformed the dynamics of the room, turning a moment of potential humiliation into a display of artistry and self-assurance. As the music continued, she felt a sense of liberation. She was no longer merely performing. She was expressing herself fully, allowing her emotions to guide her fingers across the keys. The tension that had gripped her at the beginning of the evening was replaced by a focused clarity. Each note was intentional, each chord deliberate, and each phrase conveyed a story that touched the hearts of those listening. The room was alive with the presence of her music, and the young waitress reveled in the connection she had established with her audience. The crescendo of her performance approached, and she allowed herself to embrace the full intensity of her emotions. The notes soared, rich and powerful, capturing the attention of everyone in the hall. The young waitress's talent shone through every movement, every expression, and every subtle variation in the music. The host, who had once sought to undermine her, now found himself in awe of the skill and poise displayed before him. It was a lesson in humility, a reminder that talent and determination could defy expectations and transform perceptions. As the final notes resonated through the hall, a moment of silence followed, as if the room itself were holding its breath in reverence. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, first from a few tables, then spreading throughout the hall. The guests clapped enthusiastically, some rising to their feet, their admiration evident in their expressions. The young waitress allowed herself a modest bow, acknowledging the praise without arrogance, her heart swelling with quiet pride. She had faced the challenge and emerged victorious, her talent and determination shining brighter than anyone could have imagined. Returning to her duties once more, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. The experience had not only showcased her skill, but had also reinforced her belief in herself. The audience had seen her true abilities, and she had proven that even in the face of intimidation and challenge, she could remain composed, confident, and true to herself. The young waitress had turned a moment designed for shame into a defining moment of triumph, leaving a lasting impression on all who witnessed it. The young waitress approached the piano once more, her heart steady now, her mind focused entirely on the music. She could feel the weight of the audience's gaze on her, but it no longer made her anxious. Instead, it fueled her determination. She wanted to show everyone the depth of her talent, to transform this moment into something unforgettable. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, feeling the smooth, polished surface beneath them, and began to play. The melody started softly, almost whispering through the grand hall, capturing the attention of everyone present. Each note was precise, each chord deliberate, as if she were painting a picture with sound. The guests leaned closer, drawn in by the beauty of the music. Conversations ceased, and the soft rustle of clothing and the clinking of glasses faded into silence. All eyes were on her, waiting to see what she would create. As she played, the music grew in complexity. Her fingers moved with a fluid grace, navigating intricate passages that showcased both skill and emotion. The audience could feel the passion behind every note, the careful attention to detail, and the dedication it must have taken to reach this level of mastery. The host watched in astonishment, his earlier smirk replaced by a mixture of disbelief and respect. He had expected hesitation or error, but what he saw was a display of talent that far exceeded his expectations. The young waitress's mind was entirely in the music. She could feel the energy of the room, the anticipation, and the admiration building around her. Every note was an expression of her inner strength and her quiet determination to rise above the challenge. She remembered the long hours of practice, the times she had played alone in her small room, and the sacrifices she had made to pursue her passion. Those memories gave her confidence, allowing her to play with both precision and feeling. The melody swelled, rising and falling like waves in the ocean. She added subtle flourishes, gentle trills, and rich harmonies that filled the hall with a warmth and beauty that was impossible to ignore. Guests shifted in their seats, some holding their breath, others smiling in admiration. Whispers of amazement spread through the crowd as people began to recognize the extraordinary skill before them. The young waitress felt a sense of connection with the audience, a shared understanding that transcended words and social status. The host, usually in control of every situation, realized he could no longer dictate the room's reaction. His plan to humiliate her had backfired completely. Instead, the young waitress had captured the attention and respect of everyone present. He watched as the guests' expressions changed, their surprise turning into genuine appreciation. Some clapped quietly, others nodded, and a few whispered to each other in awe. The young waitress had turned a moment designed for shame into a celebration of talent. The performance reached a dramatic section, where the music demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. Her fingers moved swiftly, yet gracefully, over the keys, creating a sound that was both powerful and tender. The audience was captivated, unable to look away. Even the most skeptical guests found themselves leaning forward, their eyes fixed on the piano, their hearts moved by the beauty of the music. The young waitress felt a surge of confidence. She was no longer just a performer. She was a storyteller, sharing her passion and skill with everyone in the room. The grand hall seemed to hold its breath as she navigated the intricate passages. Each note was carefully placed, each chord resonated with emotion. The music flowed seamlessly, a testament to years of practice and dedication. The young waitress allowed herself to be fully immersed in the moment, her focus absolute. The audience felt it too, as if they were part of the story being told through her hands and the piano keys. The host, observing from the center of the room, realized he had underestimated her completely. His challenge, meant to belittle and embarrass, had become a showcase of her extraordinary talent. He could see the admiration in the eyes of the guests, their respect for her skill and composure. He had expected to control the situation, but now he was powerless, witnessing a young woman rise above his intentions with grace and brilliance. As the music continued, the young waitress introduced subtle variations, adding layers of complexity that highlighted her creativity and mastery. She played with confidence, yet with humility, ensuring that every note contributed to the overall beauty of the piece. The audience was entranced, caught in the spell of her performance. The atmosphere in the hall shifted from anticipation to admiration, from curiosity to genuine appreciation. People were no longer focused on her role as a waitress, but on her talent, her dedication, and the way she commanded attention through music. The crescendo approached, and she allowed herself to embrace the full intensity of the piece. Her fingers flew over the keys, creating a powerful, resonant sound that filled the hall and seemed to reach every corner. The audience was mesmerized, some with wide eyes, others leaning forward, completely absorbed. The music conveyed a story, a journey, a mix of emotions that touched everyone present. The young waitress had transformed the challenge into an unforgettable experience, leaving a mark on the hearts and minds of the guests. As the final notes lingered in the air, a hush fell over the hall. The audience held its breath for a moment, savoring the beauty and skill of the performance. Then, slowly, applause erupted, starting from a few tables and spreading throughout the room. Guests clapped enthusiastically, some standing, some cheering, all expressing genuine admiration. The young waitress allowed herself a modest bow, her face glowing with quiet pride. She had taken control of the moment and turned it into a testament to her talent and inner strength. The host remained silent, his usual confidence shaken. He realized that he could not diminish her or the impression she had made on the audience. The young waitress had commanded respect, not through words or power, but through her skill, composure, and authenticity. The guests continued to speak in hushed tones about the performance, their admiration evident in every gesture and expression. The young waitress had transformed a moment meant for shame into one of triumph, proving that talent and determination could overcome even the most challenging circumstances. Returning to her duties once more, she moved with renewed confidence, carrying trays with grace and ease. The atmosphere in the hall had changed entirely. Guests now looked at her with respect and admiration, some offering compliments as they received their drinks or appetizers. The music had shifted the energy, turning a potentially humiliating situation into a celebration of skill and perseverance. The young waitress had not only faced the challenge but had risen above it, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The string quartet resumed their music, but it seemed different now, as if inspired by her performance. Conversations restarted, laughter returned, and the evening continued, yet the memory of her playing lingered in the minds of the guests. The young waitress had shown that talent, confidence, and authenticity could transform even the most intimidating moments into opportunities for greatness. Her performance had become the highlight of the evening, a story that the guests would remember long after the party ended, a testament to the power of dedication, courage, and the human spirit. The young waitress felt a surge of energy as she prepared to reach the climax of her performance. Every note she played carried a piece of herself, her emotions, her experiences, and her determination to rise above the expectations of the room. She had grown more confident with each passing moment, and now she was fully immersed in the music, letting it guide her fingers across the keys with precision and passion. The audience was spellbound. The once skeptical guests were now leaning forward, their eyes wide, their attention completely fixed on the piano. The hall was filled with the rich, resonant sound of the piano, and it seemed to echo with emotion, wrapping around each person present. People felt the intensity and depth of the music, sensing the dedication and soul behind every note. The young waitress was no longer just a performer. She was a storyteller, painting vivid scenes with sound, touching hearts without uttering a single word. The host watched from his usual spot in the center of the hall, his previous confidence now replaced by astonishment. He had underestimated her, assuming that a young waitress could not possess such skill and poise. Every chord, every rapid sequence of notes, was executed flawlessly, revealing the depth of her talent. The smug look he had once worn had disappeared, replaced by a mixture of disbelief and admiration. He could not find a way to regain control of the situation. She had completely shifted the energy of the room. As the music grew more complex, the young waitress's fingers moved swiftly and gracefully across the keys. The audience could feel the passion behind each movement, the careful control, and the natural fluidity that made the performance mesmerizing. Subtle shifts in tempo and dynamics brought the piece to life, and the emotional range was palpable. The room seemed to vibrate with the power of the music, and even the most distracted guests could not help but be drawn in, captivated by the beauty unfolding before them. The young waitress was keenly aware of the reactions around her. She noticed the surprise in the eyes of the guests, the admiration in their expressions, and the quiet amazement of those who had initially doubted her. Even the host, who had intended to humiliate her, was now caught in a web of awe. He saw the respect forming in the room, the way people were captivated not just by her skill, but by the confidence and authenticity she displayed. It was clear that she had transformed a moment meant for shame into a powerful testament to her talent and inner strength. As the piece reached its most intense section, the young waitress allowed herself to fully express the emotions that had been building within her. The music soared, dramatic and powerful, yet infused with delicate nuances that added layers of depth and feeling. Every note was deliberate, every chord resonant, and the flow of the piece was seamless. The audience could feel the story she was telling, the journey she was guiding them through, and it left them mesmerized. The host attempted to regain composure, but he could not look away. His plan to dominate the situation had been completely overturned by her skill and poise. He realized that he had underestimated her in every possible way, and that realization was humbling. Guests exchanged whispers of admiration, some visibly moved, others nodding in approval and wonder. The young waitress had captured the room entirely, commanding attention without arrogance, simply through the power of her music and presence. The crescendo approached, and the intensity of the performance grew. The young waitress's fingers flew over the keys with precision and fluidity, executing complex passages that required both technical skill and emotional depth. The music was dynamic and expressive, building anticipation with every measure. The guests were on the edge of their seats, fully immersed in the experience, unable to look away or disengage. The energy in the room was electric, filled with awe, admiration, and respect. As the final notes of the piece rang out, the young waitress allowed them to linger, letting the music resonate and fade naturally. A hush fell over the hall, a moment of collective reverence, as if everyone was holding their breath to savor the final echoes of the performance. The silence was filled with emotion, a recognition of the talent and dedication that had just been displayed. Then, slowly, the applause began, first from a few tables and then spreading throughout the hall. It was enthusiastic, heartfelt, and unwavering, a reflection of the impact her music had made. The young waitress bowed modestly, acknowledging the appreciation without drawing attention to herself. She felt a mixture of relief and pride, knowing that she had faced the challenge and exceeded expectations. The audience continued to clap and cheer, some rising to their feet in admiration. Even the host, though silent, could not hide the respect in his eyes. He had witnessed a transformation, from a moment of potential humiliation to a powerful display of talent and authenticity. Guests approached her afterward, offering compliments and expressing their admiration for her skill. Some asked about her training, others simply praised the beauty and emotion of her performance. The young waitress responded with humility, grateful for the recognition but remaining grounded. She understood that this moment was significant, not just for the applause or praise, but for the confidence it had given her, the proof that she could rise above challenges and expectations through talent and determination. The atmosphere in the hall had changed entirely. Where there had once been an undercurrent of judgment and anticipation, there was now admiration and respect. The young waitress moved through the crowd, carrying trays with ease and grace, her composure intact. People continued to discuss her performance, their excitement evident, and the host observed quietly, his earlier amusement replaced by a deep understanding of what had just occurred. The string quartet resumed their music, but the energy of the hall had shifted. Guests were more attentive, inspired by the young waitress's demonstration of skill and poise. Conversations were filled with admiration, and the impact of her performance lingered in the minds of everyone present. The young waitress had turned a potentially humiliating situation into a defining moment, proving that talent, confidence, and authenticity could transform even the most intimidating challenges into opportunities for triumph. Throughout the evening, the young waitress carried herself with renewed confidence. She had faced scrutiny, challenge, and the possibility of embarrassment, yet she had emerged with her dignity and talent fully intact. Guests looked at her not as a servant, but as a remarkable individual whose skill and composure had captivated them all. The host, though silent, understood the lesson she had imparted. True talent and confidence could not be diminished by expectations, mockery, or attempts to undermine. The night continued, filled with music, laughter, and conversation, but the memory of her performance remained vivid in everyone's mind. She had left an indelible mark on the evening, proving that even in the most challenging circumstances, courage, skill, and authenticity could prevail. The young waitress had transformed a moment meant for shame into a celebration of talent and human spirit, a story that would be remembered long after the party ended. The applause still echoed in the grand hall as the young waitress returned to her duties, her hands steady, her heart calm yet full of pride. She moved gracefully among the guests, carrying trays with ease, but her mind was replaying the moments of her performance. Each note, each chord, each subtle variation she had played seemed to linger in her thoughts, reminding her of how far she had come. The experience had been more than a performance. It had been a moment of affirmation, proof that her dedication, talent, and perseverance had a value that no one could diminish. Guests approached her with kind words and admiration. Some asked how long she had been playing piano. Others complimented the beauty and emotion of her performance. She smiled gently, accepting the praise with humility, knowing that her goal had not been to show off, but to express herself and rise above the challenge set before her. Every interaction reinforced the shift in perception. She was no longer seen merely as a waitress. She was recognized for her talent and poise, a young woman who could command attention through skill and authenticity. The host, who had initially intended to humiliate her, watched silently from the center of the room. His expression had changed. The arrogance and amusement he had carried earlier had been replaced by a quiet respect. He realized that his attempt to dominate and belittle had failed, and in doing so, he had witnessed a display of talent and strength that he could not ignore. The young waitress had turned his challenge into a moment of triumph, not just for herself, but for everyone who witnessed it. Her courage and skill had transformed the evening into a celebration of artistry and human resilience. The atmosphere in the hall was completely different from when the party had begun. The conversations that had once been casual and scattered were now filled with admiration and excitement. Guests who had initially been skeptical or indifferent were now engaged, speaking of the performance with enthusiasm and wonder. The young waitress moved through this renewed energy with confidence, her composure unwavering. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only performed a piece of music, but had left a lasting impression on everyone present. As the evening progressed, she found brief moments to reflect on what had happened. The challenge had been intimidating, yet it had also provided an opportunity to demonstrate her abilities. She thought about the hours she had spent practicing alone, the quiet determination that had kept her going despite obstacles and doubts. All of that preparation had led to this moment, where she had the chance to share her gift with an audience that had not expected it. The thought filled her with quiet satisfaction. She had proven not only her talent but also her ability to rise above pressure and expectation. The host approached her quietly, no longer with a smirk, but with a composed and measured demeanor. He spoke to her softly, expressing his respect and acknowledging the skill and confidence she had displayed. There was no arrogance in his tone, only recognition of the truth she had revealed through her music. The young waitress nodded, accepting his words without boastfulness. She understood that this acknowledgement, coming from someone who had sought to challenge her, carried weight. It was a subtle victory, not in humiliation, but in respect earned through talent and composure. The guests continued to talk about her performance, their admiration evident in their gestures and expressions. Some discussed the technical skill she had shown, others the emotion and story conveyed through her music. The young waitress felt a deep sense of connection to them, not because of status or position, but because she had shared something meaningful, something that transcended ordinary interactions. Music had become the bridge, allowing her to communicate her dedication, talent, and passion in a way that words alone could not. Throughout the evening, she continued her duties with grace and confidence. Each tray she carried, each step she took, reflected the calm assurance she had gained from her performance. The once overwhelming environment now felt manageable, almost welcoming. Guests who had initially ignored or underestimated her now offered smiles, polite conversation, and genuine appreciation. She had earned their respect, not through social position or wealth, but through her talent, courage, and authenticity. As the night wore on, the music from the string quartet resumed, but the energy of the room had been permanently altered. Conversations were lively yet respectful, filled with reflections on the performance that had captivated everyone. The young waitress observed this quietly, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond personal pride. She had transformed a moment of potential humiliation into an enduring memory, leaving a positive and lasting impact on the evening and its guests. She also thought about the broader meaning of the night. The challenge had been a test, not only of her musical ability but of her character. She had faced pressure, scrutiny, and expectations with composure and integrity. In doing so, she had demonstrated the power of talent, confidence, and resilience. It was a reminder that true skill and dedication could not be diminished by attempts to belittle or challenge. The applause, the admiration, and the respect she had earned were affirmations of this truth. The host observed quietly, reflecting on what he had witnessed. He had intended to assert power and create a moment of discomfort, yet he had been shown the depth of talent and strength that could reside in someone he had underestimated. His understanding of influence and control had been challenged, and he had learned silently the value of recognizing talent without prejudice. The young waitress's performance had not only transformed the audience's perception but had subtly shifted the dynamics of respect and admiration in the room. As the evening drew to a close, the young waitress felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had faced an unexpected challenge, navigated pressure with grace, and shared her talent in a way that resonated deeply with those around her. The applause, the whispers of admiration, and the sincere compliments from guests were meaningful, but more importantly, she had proved to herself that she could rise above expectation and challenge with skill, composure, and authenticity. When the last guests departed and the grand hall grew quiet, she lingered for a moment, reflecting on the evening. The memory of the music, the faces of those captivated by her performance, and the sense of accomplishment filled her with pride. It was a reminder that even in unexpected and challenging circumstances, talent and dedication could shine, and respect could be earned through courage and authenticity. In that quiet moment, she understood that the experience had changed her. She had faced pressure, intimidation, and expectation, and had emerged not only with her dignity intact but with her confidence strengthened. She had transformed a situation that could have been humiliating into a moment of triumph, leaving a lasting impression on all who witnessed it. The night had proven, in a tangible and unforgettable way, the power of perseverance, skill, and the human spirit to overcome challenges and shine brilliantly.